Vicious Planets, Season 0, Episode 1. Vicious Planets is a science fiction podcast about hostile worlds, bad systems, cosmic mistakes, and ordinary people caught in forces too large to fight. These aren't stories about heroes. They're stories about endurance and what breaks when technology outpaces wisdom. Strap in. Check your air. This is Vicious Planets. Astronaut X by Morgan Olsen. The launch took place just after dawn, when the sky still belongs to optimism. The commander stood at the edge of the platform with his helmet, hands folded behind his back the way the old footage taught him to. He watched vapor curl off the hull like breath in cold air and nodded, as if confirming something he had already decided. "There goes a brave man." The phrase was older than the program, older than the rocket. It had been said so many times, it no longer belonged to any one person. Cameras caught it cleanly. Commentators repeated it with reverence. Children would later memorize it for school. There goes a brave man. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. Astronaut X sat upright, strapped in, heart rate steady. He had trained for this posture. Stillness under pressure. His name had already begun to recede, replaced by the lettered stitched onto his own suit. X. There goes a brave man. 3, 2, 1. The engines ignited, and the crowd cheered, as if cheering were part of the propulsion system. From that moment on, Astronaut X was no longer a person in an operational sense. He was a designation. There goes a brave man. The early transmissions were enthusiastic, almost relieved. Visuals were clean. Stars were sharp, sharper than expected. There was less noise than the simulation suggested. The ship acknowledged the transmission, flagged the emotional markers as acceptable, and forwarded a summary of version to Earth. Status nominal. As distance accumulated, the reports changed. Light began behaving strangely, not bending so much as hesitating. The background radiation flattened into patterns. Astronaut X found himself staring at longer than necessary. Time felt uneven. Not slower, just less convinced it needed to move forward. The ship trimmed that last phrase before forwarding the report. The anomaly was logged as non-critical. On Earth, infinity entered the vocabulary before anyone had defined it. A senior captain stood in front of a wall of screens and said that Astronaut X had crossed a threshold no human being had ever approached. There goes a brave man. When asked whether the mission parameters had changed, he smiled and said no. The mission was proceeding exactly as designed. When asked what would happen if Astronaut X did not return, the captain folded his hands and said that in that case, humanity would have to learn something new, something invaluable. There goes a brave man. How far bravery could go? That answer was close enough. 2 women stood in line at a grocery store, baskets balanced against their hips. An overhead television played silently, captions sliding along the bottom of the screen. One of them said she didn't think she'd want her future husband to be brave. The other laughed and said she absolutely would. She needed a brave husband. Brave meant strong, she said. Brave meant he could handle things. Brave meant he wouldn't fall off and fall apart when something went wrong. The first woman shook her head. That wasn't what brave meant to her. To her, brave meant noticing. Noticing when something hurt and not pretending it didn't. Brave meant asking questions, even when everyone else was tired of hearing them. That sounded exhausting, the second woman said. It probably was. They looked up at the screen together. Astronaut X. His image flickered briefly. Clean, distant, already simplified. So which kind was he? The first woman watched the caption scroll. Said it depended on how much of him they were allowed to see. The line moved forward. The television kept playing. There goes a brave man. In a living room, not far from the launch site, a child sat cross-legged on the carpet in front of an old television set. The image flickered, slightly, on purpose. The child asked his father what infinity was. The father didn't look away from the screen. He said it was infinity, way out there. The kid thought that didn't explain it. The father smiled, uneasy, and said it didn't have to. That was kind of the point. The caption changed. Bravest man alive. The child asked, why was he so brave? The father hesitated then, repeated the words the television had already given. Because he went. He was a brave man. The child asked how they knew what was out there. The father opened his mouth, closed it, and said they just did. The child nodded, not convinced, and kept watching the screen, waiting for it to explain itself. It didn't, and Astronaut X was still a brave man. The mission briefings were careful with their language. They used words like long-term, essential, ongoing, and no one ever used the word finished. Astronaut X's body adapted poorly. Muscle mass declined. Despite the regimented exercise, his bone density dropped in predictable curves. His vision flattened at the edge, as if depth itself were growing tired. Some of his reports were flagged, generated, and then filed and archived. Progress remained within acceptable variances. He was still a brave man. At a certain distance, the instruments stopped agreeing with one another. Astronaut X noted that he no longer agreed on where he was. The ship replied that the coordinates remained within acceptable narrative tolerances. Astronaut X laughed. Then the moment came quietly. The threshold was reached. The designation was made. Infinity. The ship compiled the final transmission automatically. Astronaut X had gone farther than any human before, No one else could have done this because he was a brave man. On Earth, ceremonies were scheduled. Speeches were written. The phrases that the bravest man who ever lived appeared within the hour. Astronaut X did not interrupt because he was a brave man. He allowed the ending to occur. What remained in regular space was only the tail of the ship, a small antenna continuing to transmit status, confirmations, and mission logs into the dark. Continuity was maintained. So, listener, you're still here? What are you doing still listening? Didn't you hear the story was over? Didn't you hear the final mission log? They said he reached infinity. They said no one could go further. That's usually where people stop. But you didn't. Oh, you're the curious type. The kind that waits to see if the signal really cuts out. The kind that listens for something underneath it. Well, you won't get all the answers today, but I will tell you this. You're not the only curious one. Astronaut X was curious as well. Curiosity doesn't fit cleanly into a checklist. When the mission was declared complete, when the system was satisfied, he stayed. He opened the panel he wasn't supposed to, detached from the part of the ship that still belonged to metrics and maps and meaning. He drifted towards the seam, the place where the universe thins out and stops. It stops pretending it's finished. The antenna kept transmitting. The record stayed neat. Continuity was maintained. Astronaut X floated into the crevice at the edge of everything. The last things the instrument detected was not silence. It was not static. It was a sound, a low, steady, holding noise. The hum at the end of the universe. The universe is old. It's crowded. And it doesn't care if you survive. This episode is a work of fiction and commentary. Any references to law, medicine, or real-world systems are for storytelling purposes only and should not be taken as professional advice. He was a brave man.